Hi, I'm Judy Durst. I'm the Director of Education for the Big I of New Hampshire, and I have been in the insurance business for 45 years, 15 of them with the Big I. And I'll give it away to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I work with Judy in the office, and today's podcast is sponsored by Liberty Mutual Safeco. We'd like to thank them for sponsoring the next few episodes and our annual convention, which is going virtual this year. Today, we have an interview with Christopher Nicololpoulos. He is the New Hampshire Insurance Commissioner, and we'd like to ask him a few questions that we thought that you might also be interested in. So, Chris, let's just start off. Do you mind giving us an introduction to yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, good morning, Katie and Judy. It's nice to see you both again. I've been the insurance commissioner here in New Hampshire now for 5.5 months. Been an interesting 5.5 months. Prior to that, I spent 5 years as CEO and president of the Big I. Many of the people watching will know me from that role. Prior to that, I spent 6 years in private practice here in Concord, representing businesses and insurance companies, primarily professional development defense work, defending lawyers and real estate agents that were sued. And I had a government affairs practice that primarily involved representing insurance companies, AIG, CNA, and CCI at the legislature.
Cool. What do you do as an insurance commissioner?
Insurance commissioner job has been a great learning experience for me. The staff here is 76 strong, and our primary goal is to regulate all aspects of the insurance industry. And so on the company side, we license and authorize companies to do business here in New Hampshire. And as part of that, there's a lot of financial regulation work we do to make sure that they're financially viable, that they have the ability to pay claims, that their forms all comply with our laws. We also regulate all the insurance producers that have a license here in the state, and insurance adjusters. And so between producers and adjusters and companies, it's more than 45,000 people that hold a license here in New Hampshire, most of which are non-resident licenses. And then finally, we're a venue where insurance consumers can call to discuss insurance issues or complaints they might have. We have a staff of 6 people in our consumer services division, and all day long they're helping consumers understand their insurance contracts, and we help work through issues they perceive with companies or agents.
Interesting.
So anyone who has insurance in New Hampshire can just call this consumer department and ask a question about their insurance policy or their carrier.
We're not, yes and no. We're not a hotline to explain to people, specifics about insurance or to give advice about insurance. But when an insurance consumer thinks they have a complaint against a company or thinks that there was an unfair business trade practice, they can file a formal complaint here. Our team will investigate that, review their documents. Will, if necessary, we'll contact the companies for a response to those issues that were raised. And then our full consumer service team, along with our legal team, will review each of those and determine whether or not it was a viable complaint. If it is a viable complaint, can we help resolve it? And in some cases, when we worry that there's a systemic problem, we may even do a market conduct on a company based on something we learned through a consumer complaint, and ensure that there isn't a larger group of potential consumers that are adversely impacted.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you monitor how many each company or agency receives in complaints?
We track every single inquiry or complaint in a database so that we can both track the results of complaints and how we've helped consumers, whether or not it was a viable complaint. We track them, and then we also track those complaints that we believe were violations of law or of the contract. We track the ultimate resolution of them.
Interesting.
So what do you believe is your biggest hurdle as the commissioner?
Well, it's an interesting time to take on the commissioner position. So my first day of work was March 1st, March 2nd. And I was in the office for 7 work days before the governor closed down the state. And so on my 8th day of work, I sent half of my staff home. And by another week, the following week, I sent all but 15 of my staff home. So 60 people were working remote in an office where we weren't technologically equipped to send everybody home over a 7-day period. We were fortunate as a self-funded state agency that we did have good technology here, a lot of laptops, but our software was not set up to send everybody remote. Obviously, with the level of confidential data we have here, we needed to ensure that the right software security systems were in place. But we were able to do that in a pretty short time frame. And for 5 months now, we've yet to get back to full staff. The high watermark in the last, since COVID started, was about half of my staff happening to show up on one day. We've given a tremendous amount of flexibility to our teams to work from home, and it's going pretty well. But looking back and looking to the future, I'm just not sure how we ever get all the people back here until there's a vaccine and we can ensure that everybody's safe.
Yeah, that is a lot of people to manage and make sure that they're all safe. So I would say that's a huge hurdle to undertake, going from an office of 5 that you said you were managing earlier to an office of 75 plus.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say that your goals are as the commissioner during the term?
I think this is an amazing department with a lot of experts, and fortunate to have so many subject matter experts who've chosen to work for the state here in the department. But I think, there are a few hurdles, one of which is to continue sharing with the public at large that we're here as a resource, that the department has a consumer service division, that we're here to ensure that companies and agents are complying with the law, but also in a way that understands that the stool of our regulatory authority covers all 3, and to be a resource both to the licensees, the companies, and the consumers. We can be a resource to all of them, and I want to be perceived as a department that has a realistic view of how to manage those three important parts of our industry here in New Hampshire.
So where do you see the industry going in the next 5 years?
That's a great question. I suspect that our industry will look very much the same in the next 5 years. I think that insurance companies don't typically move that fast. I think there's a key role for insurance agents and independent insurance agents to play as consultants between insurance consumers and the companies. Insurance is complicated. I know Judy says it's fun, but it is complicated, and those consultants and experts help navigate a very complicated subject for insurance consumers. And so I anticipate that even with tech solutions that we see pop up every once in a while, that people will still want the one-on-one interaction with an agent or an independent agent, and that insurance is a necessary part of having a good night's sleep. People have a lot of different risks out in their lives. Security that life insurance plays, or having appropriate auto or home coverage, and I think it's a necessary part of kind of our financial security and wherewithal.
Absolutely. We could, the banks can't live without us because they won't let anybody borrow money unless it's insured.
Right.
So it's definitely the industry to be in long term, because it's always going to be needed.
And it's fun.
And
That's right.
What advice would you give to insurance agents coming into the industry, especially now with COVID?
Well, I think the advice I would give a young potential insurance agent has been the same for the last 7 years. And the best advice I've heard for a new employee in the agency is to understand a couple of things. One, the insurance industry in New Hampshire is very small, and your career is going to be very long. Hopefully a successful career will span the rest of your working life. And it's important that when you interact with customers or companies or adjusters or underwriters, that you remember that, because your relationship with these folks is more than any one transaction. I think agents sometimes think, well, I've got to get this policy bound, and I know it has some hair on it, but I'm going to potentially maybe downplay that to my underwriter and see if they'll write this policy, and I'll get the commission and I'll move on to the next one. And what they need to understand is that underwriters and companies are partners with them. And if you have a problems account, tell them. Be honest, because they're going to remember the next time you call and say, I've got this account that I want you to write, that last time you may have misled them. There is an insurance product for all consumers, and it may not be given the consumer makeup or the risk, it may not be the lowest dollar provider, but getting appropriate coverage and allowing an underwriter to actually underwrite the risk is going to be the best solution. And people move around, companies change, their risk tolerance change, but your reputation is paramount. I think other advice I would give is, use your resources. As a member of the Big I, you've got a phenomenal staff there of career experts in all aspects of insurance. And it takes nothing more than a few minutes of your time to call Judy or Joan and say, I've got this interesting question and I don't know who to ask. I think oftentimes agents think, well, if I call, they're going to think I'm not smart enough. The people who aren't smart enough don't make a call and guess, and then have to make it up later or figure it out later. So use your resources. Don't be shy when you don't know something. And if I can keep giving advice, I have other advice, is document the heck out of your files.
Yeah.
When you're working a transaction today, you remember why you're making certain decisions, why you're recommending a certain coverage over another, or what the consumer told you. I know from experience representing lots of professionals that over time you forget why you did a certain thing months or years later, and you have a management system that will allow you to track those things and to make good notes. And you will find that is an invaluable resource later to be able to go back and remember why.
Yeah.
And so I think new agents should use their management system, should make notes, because you won't be able to remember your hundreds and hundreds of clients, 5, 6, 7 renewals years and years later. It's a phenomenal tool. This is a wonderful industry to be in. It has a reasonable work-life balance. You get to help people. You get to make a good living. And entering into the insurance industry doesn't mean you're pigeonholed for life. There are a lot of varying jobs. You oftentimes you might start off as a CSR or a producer and may love it. But you may also decide, well, I want to do something different. And these agencies have jobs from PR and social media to accounting. Companies have claims and adjusting.
Auditing.
Right. And you can work a whole career doing a number of different expertise and find something that you really enjoy. You may even end up being the insurance commissioner.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time today. We know how busy you are, and we're so glad to have you on, especially as our first guest.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yes. And I want to say again, thank you to our sponsors, Liberty Mutual and Safeco, for sponsoring this podcast and our first virtual annual convention this September, being held the 28th and 29th. Hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.